In today's video, we're going to focus on flight planning in Microsoft Flight Simulator, primarily for Xbox version users, although everything we cover today will also apply to the PC. Why would you want to create a flight plan? Well, perhaps you want a more realistic experience, or fly from one airport to another, or perhaps even take in various points of interest. A flight plan can help you stay on track and get you to your destination. This video was recorded using an Xbox Series X, but everything that I cover equally applies to the Xbox Series S. This is the second in my planned series of videos getting started aimed at Xbox users and help you get the most out of your Microsoft Flight Simulation experience. If you missed my first video, which will help you find your way around, there'll be a link above and in the notes below this video. A warm welcome to the SimHanger channel. My name's Mark. Thanks for watching and let's get started. Flight planning in the real world is a complex subject. We're not going to get bogged down with all the technical details. Today we're going to stick to the basics that'll get you up in the air and flying. From the main menu, let's select World Map. All our flight planning is done here. And for this tutorial, I'm going to zoom in to the UK, England. Today I'm using a keyboard and mouse, but you can use a controller as well. We can see on the map there's all different types of icons, and the closer we get, the more icons there are. For flight planning, we need to know what those icons mean. So from the bottom menu, let's hit More, and then click on Show Legend. We can now see a list of those icons and what they stand for. The blue bar on the side means that the list is scrollable. Today we need to know what an airport icon looks like, as well as those VORs, etc. under nav aids. A VOR is a beacon that sends out a radio signal, a VHF signal that allows aircraft to establish their heading and whereabouts. Take a little time to get familiar with the icons. Let's hide the legend now and open the Filters menu. This menu determines what information is shown on the world map. How much information you want displayed on the world map may depend on what type of flight planning that you're doing. Personally, when flight planning, I like to keep it fairly simple and only have the needed information displayed. Once again, you can scroll down through the list of various options. I like to have all the different types of airports on so I can see them. And as you make any changes, the changes happen dynamically on the map. So for example, let's have a look at, let's say landmarks for example. Landmarks are point of interest. So if we have a look here at Blenheim Palace, the home of Winston Churchill, this is shown as we have landmarks on. If we now turn it off, we see that it disappears from the map. So it's up to you to experiment with what you want on and what you want off. As you get more familiar with the different types of flight planning, you'll find it easier to determine what should be off and what should be on. I recommend have your airports and nav aids on, and if you're flying low and slow, well, have your landmarks on as well. Let's close this menu and return to the world map. We can see an airport there, EGKK, Gatwick. Let's just zoom in there. Once zoomed in, we'll just look at some of the other options. On the top left hand side, we can choose our aircraft. I'm not going to cover this in any great detail as I covered it in my previous video. Just one quick point I want to cover. By opening the Customization tab, we're presented with a list of options, and the one I'm particularly interested in is tail number. And here you can enter your own name or designation, and it will appear on the side and inside the aircraft as well. So I've entered the name SimHanger, and we'll be able to see that on the aircraft later on. It's quite a cool feature. Let's now have a quick look at the flight conditions on the top right hand corner and see what options are available to us there. Currently I've got multiplayer and air traffic set to off, and at the bottom are weather selections. We can either have live weather or preset weather. I currently have it set to preset, and there's a varied range of different weather presets, from clear and few clouds all the way to overcast, snow and stormy and so on. Weather preset presents a quick and easy way to set up whatever weather you want to fly in. For today, I'm going to stick with few clouds. With regards to multiplayer, if we pop back to the map, you can see there's no traffic displayed on my map as I have multiplayer currently off. Let's now turn multiplayer on. And there are two options available, all players and live players. Normally you would select all players, especially if you're just starting out. Generally speaking, the live players options are for those that want to follow standard procedures and by and large conform to air traffic regulations. Live players are for those that want a more authentic procedural flight sim experience. For multiplayer, in addition to all players, we need to click on live traffic. Let's now go back to Heathrow and see if we can pick up any live traffic. It does take a few moments to appear as the information is gained from the server. We can see other aircraft now on our map, and we'll also be able to see them in the simulation. Multiplayer is now on. The first step in the flight planning exercise is to decide how you want to start your flight. Do you want to start cold and dark with the engine off, on the runway, or in the air? There's quite a bit of traffic at Gatwick at the moment, so I think we'll move slightly further away. And I've chosen Echo Golf Kilo Romeo Redhill. Your starting position will determine your aircraft state when you start your flight. On a runway, engines running, or at one of the parking bays, cold and dark, engine off. So I've chosen runway 08R, set as departure, and let's go fly and see if it works. And here we are on the runway with the engine running and ready for takeoff. We've now exited that flight. Let's now choose a parking slot. And we should start up cold and dark with the engine and aircraft off. Ramp 12 is as good as any. Set as departure. Let's go. We're in the parking bay and we can see that the engine and all the instruments are switched off. So if we wanted to go through the full startup procedure, well, we would choose this option. You'll remember that when choosing the aircraft under the customization tab, we chose a tail number. And I put in SimHanger, and there it is on the side of the aircraft. Back to our world map. Now, what if you want to start in the air and flying? Well, you can do that too. Pick a point, click on it, and set as departure. Information is displayed. We're at 1500 feet. Let's give it a go. 1.2 mention from my experiences is if you're flying a small aircraft, it's going to limit your altitude to a minimum of 1500 feet. If you're flying one of the heavies, such as the Airbus or one of the Boeings, it'll limit your altitude to 5,000 feet. You can select higher, and we will look at that a little later on, but you can't select lower. We're now ready to fly, and we are at the mouth of the estuary of the Thames as selected on the map, and we can see we're at 1500 feet. This is a great shortcut to get you in the air and flying around quickly, especially for those shorter hops. We're now back to our world map, and now let's really get into the basics of flight planning, which is essentially going from A to B. To start your flight, you can select any airport, either on the runway or in the parking bay as covered. But we're going to start where we left off at a custom point in the air. Set that as our departure, and we can see we're at 1500 feet, with no option to change that. However, if we select a destination airport, select as arrival, our route is shown, but we also have a new menu option, and that is Navlog. Let's click on that. Navlog is only available when you select a destination. 16,500 feet's too high for this small aircraft, not realistic. I'm going to enter my selected altitude into the box. I've chosen 4,500 feet. There's another advantage to choosing a destination, whether or not you intended to fly there or not, as it will always point your aircraft towards your destination or your next waypoint. With no destination selected, when you start your flight, you could be pointed in any direction. So bear that in mind. Let's see if it's worked. Because of our altitude, we've found ourselves in a little bit of cloud, but no problem, and I see our altitude is 4,500 feet, exactly as planned. and we're heading in the right direction up the estuary. Once again, we return to the world map. There are two primary types of flight plans: VFR, Visual Flight Rules, and IFR, Instrument Flight Rules. Visual Flight Rules, as the name implies, relies mainly on the pilot taking a visual reference of his location to ensure he's staying on plan, and this is often used in combination with other navigation equipment. As the primary reference is visual, obviously that does not apply and you can't fly VFR if the weather is poor or you're in cloud. VFR flight rules is very typical for small general aviation aircraft. Instrument flight rules, on the other hand, means the pilot is relying on the gauges and navigation equipment within the aircraft to keep him on track. The weather conditions or the altitude that the pilot is flying at may not allow for reliable visual reference. Typically, although not exclusively, you will often find the larger aircraft will be flying IFR. And that's certainly the case with the likes of Boeing or Airbus aircraft. Let's create a quick VFR flight plan. I've chosen Echo Golf Kilo Bravo and set that as my departure. And I'm going to choose runway 03 for the initial takeoff. Whenever possible, pilots will take off heading into the wind. And we're going to plan a sightseeing tour over London. But first, let's pick an arrival airport. And I think on this occasion, I'm going to choose Heathrow, Echo Golf Lima Lima. I can either set as arrival and let the sim choose the runway, or I can zoom to details and pick a runway myself. In this case, I'm picking runway 27R or 27 right. The simulator has now picked a direct route for the aircraft to fly, with an allowance on takeoff to gain some altitude and for a final alignment with the runway when arriving at Heathrow. This particular route is direct GPS. Our choice of type of flight plan is available under the drop-down menu below the aircraft selection box, but we'll touch on that more later. Once we have departure and arrival, we can now pick our waypoints. I want to fly over London City Airport, so I click on it and I choose Add, and the blue line that defines our route changes automatically. Let's now pick a number of waypoints along the route as we follow the Thames through London City. And as this is a VFR flight, I'm going to choose mainly points of interest rather than any navigational beacons. If at any stage you selected a waypoint and you don't want it, then click on it again and it will give you a remove option, and your flight plan will adjust accordingly. Okay, so that's it, just about done. I think I will just add Kew Gardens as the last point. There we are. So I've now selected multiple points of interest for my flight plan, a VFR flight plan, through the City of London. This will allow me in Sim to fly through and look at the various points of interest. Once you've created a flight plan, you get the option to save it. A submenu comes up, click on Save. Ignore the warning message as we haven't put any characters in at this stage. Give the flight plan a descriptive name so you know what it is. And you're presented with two options. Save it either as a .flt plan or a .pln plan. If you save it as a .pln plan, then only the route will be saved. If you save it as a .flt, not only is the route saved, but the weather conditions, time of day and aircraft are also fixed. The most common is saving it as a .pln, so you can fly it with different types of aircraft. Now that we've completed our flight plan, we can go to Navlog and get some more information. In addition to the direction and the distance between each waypoint, it also displays altitude and other information. And of course, we could change our altitude if we wanted to at this point. We also have the option to scroll through and review our flight plan to make sure we've captured all the points that we wanted to. Well, we're happy with that, so we can now close this window and let's go back into the sim and see if everything's as it should be. As planned, we now find ourselves at Biggin Hill on the runway with the engine running. This aircraft is equipped with a GPS. Let's have a quick look, as our flight plan will be visible. Our Garmin GPS is showing us at Echo Golf Kilo Bravo Biggin Hill, which is correct, and we can now adjust the range to see the rest of the flight plan. The next waypoint is Echo Golf Lima Charlie, which is London City Airport, so that all looks good. We'll just increase the range a little bit to have a look at our final destination, which should be Echo Golf Lima Lima Heathrow. As most of the waypoints on our flight plan are in fact points of interest and not navigational points, you see they're shown as USR, or User Point 01, through to User 07. This is normal. By clicking on the flight plan button on our GPS, we can then have a look at the various steps along the way. So we've created a VFR flight plan along the Thames in London, and it's showing in the GPS. The magenta line obviously is indicating our route. Let's now take a look at some other forms of flight planning. And these are usually associated with IFR, Instrument Flight Rules. We're back at Gatwick and we've set our departure as runway 26 left. This time we're going to be flying somewhat further than what we did last time, and we're going to choose, I think we'll choose Newcastle up here in the north and set that as arrival. The sim has now plotted a route based on the VFR direct GPS route, but flying a direct route may not be viable or even allowed in the real world. Note our two waypoints are highlighted on the top bar. Let's now change the type of flight plan to VOR to VOR, and along the top route you can see it's added in a number of different VOR stations as waypoints along our route. This particular route could be flown VFR or IFR in fact. From our drop-down menu I've now chosen the IFR Low Altitude Airways. And along the top bar we can see there's a whole lot more of different waypoints. Many of these are actually navigational waypoints based on their GPS coordinates. They are in fact airways, and they are different for both low and high altitude flying. Roads in the sky. High altitude normally starts at 18,000 feet and above. Clicking on a waypoint will move the map to that particular nav location. For full flight planning there are further factors to consider, such as SIDS or Standard Instrument Departure, and STARS, which is Standard Terminal Arrival Procedures, as well as various ILS approaches and so on. But that's too much detail for today and will be the subject of a future video. Let me know if you're interested in the comments below. Let's now clear this flight plan. We can do that by hitting the Reset tab or the X button on your controller. And let's now plan another route using high altitude airways. And once again I'm choosing Gatwick as our departure point. And for arrival, we're moving to Germany and we're going to choose Hanover, and we'll be landing runway 27 right. We'll set this as our arrival. The sim by default has once again drawn in the VFR direct GPS route. And if we wanted to, we could then change this to VOR if we wanted, or low altitude. That's our low altitude route there. But let's change it now to high altitude airways. An aircraft such as our Bonanza would fly this at low altitude airways if it was flying IFR. A Boeing or Airbus or something similar would use high altitude airways. As we're in the Bonanza, let's choose low altitude and let's go and have a look at the flight plan. We've started on the runway at Gatwick. We can now check our Garmin GPS in our aircraft to see whether or not the flight plan is there. It's indicating we're on the ground at Gatwick, runway 27, which is correct, and by adjusting the range we're able to zoom out and have a look at the route. And our destination is Echo Delta Delta Victor Hangover, and yep, that all looks correct. Once again we can click on the flight plan and have a look at each individual waypoint to make sure that everything's in order. So for our Beechcraft Bonanza we now have a low altitude flight plan from Gatwick to Hanover. If I'd been in the Airbus A320, I would have chosen the high altitude airway for the flight plan. Unfortunately, as far as I'm aware anyway, there is no way to import an external flight plan into the Xbox version of Microsoft Flight Simulator, whereas you can with the PC. Hopefully this will be resolved in the not too distant future, but for now, if you're wanting to join a fly-in or something similar to that with a flight plan, you have no other option but to manually enter that flight plan. Bearing in mind everything that we've covered today, here's how we can manually enter a flight plan. In this example, we're in Norway and we want to enter a multiplayer fly-in that's being hosted. And these are the flight plan details that we've been given. So let's go ahead and manually enter this flight plan and then save it. From the flight plan details, our departure is Echo November Sierra Delta. That's the airport code. We can enter that to find the airport or enter the name. Search results have come up, so we can select that. Echo November Sierra Delta. And the full flight plan details also said that departure was via runway 26. So we can click on the airport, zoom to details, and we can choose runway 26 as our departure point. Next we need to enter our arrival, otherwise we won't be able to enter the waypoints. And our flight plan indicates Echo November Kilo Bravo. So under Select Arrival Airport, let's enter that code. The sim has found that airport, so we can now select that one. And again, the flight plan information that we have requires us to zoom into details in order to select runway 07 for landing. It's currently set to runway 25. Click on runway 7 and select arrival. So now our departure and arrival airports are set. Now we need to add in the other airports as waypoints. You can use the search facility, but depending on the size of the flight plan, it's often quicker to locate the next point on the map directly. Our second point is Echo November Oscar Victor Hovden. There it is. I click on the airport and choose Add, and it adds it into the flight plan. Our next point is Echo November Alpha Lima Vigra. I know roughly where it is, but if you can't find it, use the search facility. There it is. I will add that in. Once again, I'll click on it and choose Add. I've enabled the showing of animals or fauna on the map, and I see almost en route there are seagulls, so I could add that if I wanted to the flight plan. And as mentioned before, if we want to delete any particular point, we can choose the remove option. Let's now go ahead and complete the rest of the flight plan. I will speed this up a bit because it can be a little bit tedious. We're done. The flight plan has been entered and we're ready to join the multiplayer session. To keep the flight plan, we'll choose Save from the bottom bar. Click on Save. Give it a descriptive name so you know what it is. I've just chosen the ICAO code for the departure and arrival airports, and I'm going to save it as a .pln file so I can fly it with any aircraft and set the weather to suit. Norway is always an interesting place to fly, and I may want to do this route again at some point. If you wanted to load a flight plan, it's more or less exactly the same process. I'll just reset the flight plan to get rid of it. Go down to the bottom menu and open up the More option, and that will give me the opportunity to load or save. In this case, I'm going to load. The one I've saved is at the top, so I'll click on that, click OK, and my flight plan is back and ready for use. I can see it in my GPS and I'm ready to go and take flight. Well, if you've stuck with me this far, well done. As mentioned earlier, flight planning is a complex subject in itself, and real-world pilots take weeks and months to learn all the ins and outs of flight planning. But today we have been able to cover all the basics, and it should allow you to get up in the air and flight plan with some confidence. I acknowledge that I have made some generalizations, but all the basics I believe have been covered. Microsoft Flight Simulator is an amazing piece of software, so don't be shy to do some flight planning yourself. Once you get the hang of it, you'll find you'll be able to do it fairly quickly and easily. If you'd like more detailed coverage in terms of SIDS and stars, let me know in the comments below. Well, that wraps it up for today. Thank you very much for joining me. Take care, look after yourselves. I'll see you all very soon, and bye for now.